Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Critical Oxygen podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your athletic potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson, and today we're joined by Andy St. Germain. He's a former CrossFit Games athlete and current CrossFit coach at Central Athlete in Austin, Texas. Andy's going to be our boots on the ground for all things CrossFit and functional sports. Him and I are both firm believers that there could be more exercise science within the CrossFit and functional fitness space. So we're going to be using our conversations accordingly to get more science into the CrossFit community. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate you having me. My background a little bit is I got into the health and performance space through wrestling. I was born out in California, lived my first 12 years of my life out there, and that's where I first developed my passion for wrestling. And wrestling led me all the way through my college years. And then as I quit competing in wrestling, I still had this desire to be competitive. And that's where I got introduced to CrossFit. And unfortunately, I didn't make it to the games. I made it to regionals as an individual, and I made it to regionals on a team as well. But we were just shy of making it to the games. So I can't quite give myself the credentials of a games athlete, but that was always the goal. I was always striving for it. CrossFit really opened up the lens of health and performance that I look through now. It was really the gateway to that. And I was competitive in CrossFit from 2013 to 2018. And at the time I was also coaching, and that's when coaching started to take a bigger piece of my life. And then I started, once I can quit competing in CrossFit, I then took on coaching as my profession. And that's when I really just started diving into exercise physiology and a lot of other just ways to optimize human performance. And right now I work for Central Athlete and Central Health. We're here in Austin, Texas. I work with CrossFit athletes and then also just like general population athletes as well. That's kind of what I'm doing now.
So that's pretty cool. I think your background is kind of similar to, I think, what a lot of, say, like CrossFit, so like aspiring games athletes go through. Is they're like, oh, I really enjoy the sport of CrossFit, I want to stay competitive. So then they start to transition over into the coaching world, right? Because if you have some success, obviously at least a little bit more than the general individual of how to like be successful within CrossFit, because CrossFit is such a multifaceted sport. So it's something that I do want to jump back though a little bit. So you wrestled through like from high school like into college? Like did you like wrestle in college as well?
Yeah, I wrestled at a couple small schools in college. I was, when I was in college, I was actually going through a really tough time just in my own personal life, and I was bouncing back and forth between like, should I wrestle, should I not wrestle? So the first year, I went to a junior college in Illinois. It's Harper College, and I wrestled there for a year. And the goal was to try and just kind of fill things out and see if this was something I wanted to continue to do. And then after that year, I decided I wasn't going to wrestle anymore. So I actually hung it up. I moved back home. I went to one of the Purdue University satellite locations, Purdue North Central, up in Northwest Indiana. And then after a year away from the sport, I decided I wanted to wrestle again. So then my junior year, I went back and I went to Calumet College of St. Joseph, which is in Whiting, Indiana. And I gave wrestling a go for another year, and then I hung it up after that. So two of the 4 years of college was wrestling, kind of bouncing in and out, trying to figure out if it was, wrestling changed my life, and it's a passion that has forever affected the trajectory of where my life has gone. I was just having a lot of personal struggles in my own personal life that kind of kept pulling me back. I had some knee surgeries, which then led to prescription medication, which then led to some substance problems. And that whole kind of like yeah, it just created a whole whirlwind of things for me. So I kept getting pulled back into wrestling, but then also needing to take care of myself from this more
Right.
just like mental health standpoint. But wrestling will forever be hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I think wrestling is certainly it's an amazing sport because at the end of the day, you're reliant purely on yourself. But it's different in, from like endurance sport, which is kind of what I grew up with, in that, when you go into the ring with somebody else who is wrestling you, it's they're given 100% and you're given 100% and you need to overtake their 100%, right? So
Yeah.
it really, like, some of the most like mentally tough, like just strongest individuals I've ever met were during my brief stint into wrestling. I wouldn't say I was a wrestler. I wrestled like 1 year,
Uh-huh.
and I was probably like, like fourth or something like that. I was wrestling JV. It was super fun. I was super fit.
Hmm.
Um, but it was one of those things where it's just it it's a sport that, if you haven't ever tested yourself, it really is, one of those things where you get into the ring with somebody or onto the wrestling mat with somebody, and it's everything you got versus everything they got. So do you think that, like, those lessons kind of helped you when you started competing within, CrossFit?
Oh, for sure. For sure. That's you really, yeah, you articulated it in a really good way. It's like there's so many emotions and so much drive, and it's really like one man versus another man, like going at like there's a lot in wrestling from just like a physical standpoint, but just like also just like an energetic and emotional standpoint. It's like you really are you're wrestling with
Mhm.
another human being. So there's so much that's involved with that. And the wrestling matches, in high school, they're 6 minutes. There's 3 2-minute rounds, and then as you get into college, there's 7 minutes. It's a 3 minute, then a 2 minute, 2 minute round. Um, so it really is 6 to 7 minutes of just like go, 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 go. And the
Mhm.
ability to, conditioning is huge in wrestling. And you have to be able to endure a lot of struggle for to be good, and it's just part of the sport. And that's one thing that really helped me as I transitioned over to CrossFit is this ability to just kind of like shut off the mind and just go and go.
Mhm.
And there's, that kind of brings a whole other topic of the conversation around like physiology and like there's there is physiological limitations, but your mental ability can be a limitation as well.
Mhm.
And people's ability to just like shut their mind off and put it away and just be able to grind is like, I see some people do some really cool stuff in CrossFit just because of that. It's like they're maybe not that physiologically like special, but they can just like
Mhm.
shut it off and they can go and they
Mhm.
can suffer and they can put up with the pain. And that's a piece of that I got from wrestling that really transitioned over to my CrossFit career.
Yeah, yeah, I think that for me, endurance sports really helped with that
Mm-hmm.
because, especially with those really long races, like, doing an Ironman, doing an ultra marathon, like, you have to be able to shut your mind off because everything in your body is telling you, why are you doing this? Like, stop. Like, just stop going. And you have to, will yourself to essentially continue to go. And it is slightly different than CrossFit, right? Where, CrossFit, a lot of the stuff you're doing is higher intensity. The time domains are a lot shorter. So the pain is, I think, a lot more severe, but it's a little bit more acute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the pain is a little bit different, but, at the end of the day, like, learning to shut your brain off and just kind of like go to that dark place and just kind of just go, like, there's an Eminem song, right? It's like, till my lungs collapse, or, something like that. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there really is. I
but
mean, it's a different, these sort of short bursts versus like these long duration, like they're both painful, but they're just like, it's a different type of pain. One's like this more long, grueling, enduring, and the other one's like more acute, but like just shorter duration. Like,
right.
they're just both painful, but different types.
I know. And that's exactly like, that's what you have to endure as a CrossFit athlete, right? It's like we see in the games, I don't even know what like the longest event this year was, but the shorter ones are 3 to 5 minutes. And then the longer ones, like, the marathon row, like a few years ago, was like what, 3.5 to 4.5 hours, depending on who you are. It doesn't matter which way you cut it. If you're a good rower, sitting on an erg for that long is not fun.
Yes.
And it is certainly something, just from the mental perspective, that's like always been so impressive to me about, like especially like those really high level athletes who can, just kind of like glaze over and just go. Like even during Murph, right? Like if you're doing Murph and you're actually trying to get a decent time, you gotta shut off. And especially like that last mile where you're just trying to like get there, you just have to just be like, okay, one foot in front of the other. Don't even worry how bad it hurts. Just go as hard as you can. You're almost there.
Yep.
Those are some of the thoughts that I have.
Yeah, no, and it's so true. And that's one thing that's really like, even this conversation is bringing back and I'd mentioned it a little bit of just like how important what's going on up here matters in performance in sports. And you can have the physiology of a god, but if it's not here, if you don't have this, you're not going anywhere. Just like it can be opposite. Like your physiology may not have the perfect roadmap to be really good at whatever, like CrossFit or whatever sport it is. But if you have the mental resiliency and the grind, like you can make up for that. So there really is. It's like in the CrossFit world, and really just any sport or performance, it shines the light on the mental piece and how important that is. And that's the one thing I also think that's so great about sports is it has that transition over into real life. And like that mental grind that you go through with whether it's training in a competitive atmosphere or just for overall health and well-being, like that mental grind and the wins that come from a psychological standpoint are things that also can carry over into just everyday life. And that's what's so special about them.
Oh yeah, there are so many parallels with sport and life. And one of the things that I really focused on during like the latter portion of my PhD, where I was like, I was struggling a lot to like just get through it. And I was like, okay, I finally made up my mind. I'm like, look, like Phil, you did an Ironman. Like that's physically and mentally probably the most demanding thing you've ever done up until this point. Take a similar approach where it's like, okay, just get to the next aid station, get to the next cone, get the next assignment done, right? In terms of, like getting the PhD done, because nothing worth doing, or, it's like, what's the quote? It's like, nothing worth doing is easy or something along those lines. But, and it teaches you a lot about self-discipline when you have a goal in mind and it's not going well and you're able to overcome that, right? Like, so where I'm going with this is towards the end of my Ironman, I was cramping up, from my shoulder to my stomach. Like I was just cramping everywhere. And it was one of those things where every time I would start running, I'd cramp up more. So I'd be like, okay, well, just aim for that cone down the road. So I'd try to jog to the cone and then I'd walk a little bit. And then I jog to the next cone and walk a little bit. And in terms of application to life, that's kind of how I had to take the PhD for a little while. As I said, okay, well, write one paragraph and walk a little bit, take a little bit of a rest, write another paragraph, take a little bit of a rest, so on and so forth. And I think that mindset really saved me from like, essentially getting the letters after my name and graduating with a PhD versus not. Because if I would have just been like given up in the middle when I felt like everything was hopeless, as opposed to kind of taking that mental approach, then, like I wouldn't have been able to complete that. So yeah, man, I didn't think we were going to go down this the mental rabbit hole today.
But deep a little bit here, but
yeah, no, but man, I think it's it's really important for people to, you know, to recognize like your mind is a super powerful
Mhm,
thing,
mhm, mhm.
and being able to, kind of like hush the negative thoughts in your mind, especially during those workouts, isn't just good for those workouts, but it's also good for, the other aspects of life.
Mhm.
Like, when shit gets hard and, you need to grind a little bit, or I mean, or just even listening to your body, right? From an exercise physiology perspective, is like, it's really easy to ignore what's going on in our body. But if we start to listen to it and mentally say, okay, like, can we evaluate, is this an injury and something I should really be concerned about? Or is this something where, yeah, I can push a little, I can push through, and then I can like rest a little bit
Uh-huh,
later, right?
uh-huh.
Because there is a difference between like feeling injured and, just feeling like shit, say
Yeah.
during a workout, right?
Yeah, that's very interesting point, Phil. And that's right. I think it can go the other way as well, as like, listening to your body in the sense of like, I just go to when I was competing in CrossFit, I was in this idea. I wasn't as well versed in just physiology and performance and what actually is needed to like move the needle. And it was always just go, 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 more, push, push, push. Like, how can I just keep doing? And now as I coach people, I see the opportunities when people have that sort of mindset. And the thing is CrossFit breeds a lot of people that have that similar mindset. And sometimes
Oh
it's,
yeah.
hey, where your growth is actually putting the brakes on and actually saying, hey, today
Hmm.
you need to rest. You need to not do anything. Or you need to like actually
Right.
just go sleep or go get in nature or go focus on recovery and not just always be go 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 go. So I think it's like
Hmm.
it's double sided. It's like, is there areas that I can push more and that can be the mental challenge?
Hmm.
But is there areas that I need to like back up and I need to stop pushing? And that in itself is a
Yeah,
challenge within
for
itself.
sure.
So, and that's what I've
Yeah.
noticed with as I uh, continue to dive into performance physiology and I run assessments on people and I see what people truly need. I start, there's some athletes that I'm training and it's like, you need to slow down. And they're like, that is hard. And I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
that's it. That's the win. You're
Yeah.
always going so fast. It's like you just need to slow down a little. Not all the time, just a little bit. You need to just slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't that
Yeah.
they it's a struggle for them to do that. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the resistance that you overcome, and then you're
Hmm.
gonna start getting better. So it's like
Yeah.
it's double sided on both ends.
Yeah. No, I know. It's this whole like say hustle mentality, right? Like on YouTube where you have like the David Goggins of the world being like, all you got to do is wake up and go hard every single day. And it's like, yeah, I think for some people who don't have that, say type A, we'll call them type A CrossFit individuals, right? Where that is like, and I'm sure these people that go to your gym. They show up at your gym and they're like, oh, like limping in or like, doing some extra foam rolling or something like that. You're like, oh, hey, Bill. It's like, you're gonna take it easy today. And he's like, oh, I probably should, but
Nah.
we'll see. And then he's the one that finishes the workout first. And you're like, hey, Bill, like, well, what happened to your strategy at the beginning? Like, why didn't you go slower? And, for those type of people, speaking, as being one of those types of
Mhm,
individuals, that in and of itself is super, super mentally challenging to let
mhm,
go of that ego and be like, look, I need to do what's best for my
mhm,
body today.
mhm,
And what's best for my body is actually slowing
mhm,
down.
mhm,
And in
mhm,
those cases, right, it's actually easier, from a mental perspective to just go
mhm,
hard and
mhm,
just,
mhm.
just serve that side of like your
Yeah.
ego. Like, well, at least I went hard in the
Yes.
gym today, as opposed to being like, well, I actually slowed down and it felt like it felt like a massive shit show, but I'm healthy, today, and I'll be healthy tomorrow
Mhm,
from
mhm.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, how, the mental battle, is kind of always there, and being mentally strong can mean going both easy, like, I think okay, so I think this is like my definition of mental
Mm,
strength is knowing when to go hard and when to go
mm,
easy, and being able to jump back and forth, between those two sort of things.
Absolutely. And that's what because it's very, and like as we're talking about it, it's like, hey, what does the mind need, and then what does the body need? And they're two separate
Hmm.
things, and they can both. There can be
Hmm.
some overlap, and they can need some of the same, but they're also completely separate as well. And that's one thing that I
Yeah.
see. The reality is like CrossFit style training is high. Just I shouldn't even say CrossFit, just high intensity exercise is going to give a lot more dopamine than any other type of training. I mean, strength training and high intensity are
Yep.
going to be your biggest shots of dopamine in the brain. And, there's a whole list of
Hmm.
things, social media is dopamine, drugs are dopamine, food's dopamine. So there's these things that we become like
Right.
addicted to in our everyday world. And that's where I see performance in CrossFit is people get addicted to the high intensity and they're just pushing, pushing, pushing.
Hmm.
And it's like, hey,
Hmm.
that's what your mind needs right now. Your mind want you to
Yep.
do that, but physiologically, from your either like your ability to what your heart's doing, what your muscles are doing, it's like you need to slow down and being able to kind of
Hmm.
decipher. And I think you did a really good job of putting it out. It's like, hey, I can go hard when I need to go hard, but I can also slow it down when I need to slow it down. I think that's like so spot on.
Yeah, and I think people who do struggle with that, this is like my piece of advice to all of you is, it's like it is that dopamine hit, right? Of crushing it at your workout or going hard and doing it. But if you can connect a another form of dopamine release to going easier for those different days, then you're gonna start to be able to overcome the constant need to go hard
Mm.
all the time. So, for example, for me, I'd been running a little bit, lately, injured my Achilles, so I had to get on the bike, and it's sometimes some days it's hard for me to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to go easy. But now what I've started to implement with that is like, oh, well, when I'm riding on a stationary bike in the little walkway on at my house, I can actually read journal
Mm.
articles and I can respond to people on my
Mm.
social media, and that's rewarding to me. So, even though I don't feel like say I'm working super hard, I am still getting that reassurance and that positive reinforcement from just getting out, going easy, and having other triggers for that reward system in a sense. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, so I don't know too much about like the dopamine release response. But I think from that perspective, like there's so many people I meet who are just like they go to the CrossFit gym every single day and they just beat the heck out of themselves, and then they're like, yeah, and then I get sick every
Mm.
every 2 or 3 months, and then I get injured every 2 or 3 months, and you're like it's essentially a cheap dopamine hit if you're always getting injured every 2 to 3 months. So you need to figure out ways of getting a little bit more of the expensive
Yeah.
dopamine. i think
Yeah.
i think that's what it is, as opposed to the cheap stuff, which is like scrolling on your phone, giving into the ego at the gym, doing other
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. Love it, man.
Yeah. So, dude, that was great. I think I really like talking about like the mental aspect
Mm-hmm.
of things. Um but and I guess so do you there's been people in the past that I've talked to who are coaches who actually evaluate the type of say like mental game somebody has going on, whether that's like I can't even remember the test right now, but do you do any of that sort of testing, or do you just kind of observe the athlete and then just kind of you know talk to them, see how they're doing during workouts, like other
To
things
assess
like
the
that?
mental aspect of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. That actually, I should come up with something on paper to like actually test. I think it's hard because the mind can be tricky as well. And I don't know if I think it
Hmm.
has to take all things into consideration, because if it was just like a questionnaire or having people answer stuff is like sometimes people trick themselves into what they're they don't even know,
Yeah.
their mind will
Yeah.
you'll trick yourself very easily. So there's a piece where when it comes to assessing the mental side of things, I think it's just taking all the information and just observing it for what it is. Like, how
Hmm.
are people showing up in their training? What does their work and just general life look like? Are they generally like on time, or are they late? Just taking all of these things into consideration gives a picture of like, hey, what kind of headspace are they in? Where are they at?
Yeah.
And if the mental capacity, and the thing is like, I think it's on a spectrum, just like everything is like, some days people can like,
Mm-hmm.
the most mentally strong person, and even some of like the most mentally strong athletes that I have, there's days where they aren't, and that's
Yeah.
okay, and that's life. And a lot of times that's just like, they got other stuff going on. It's like work or relationships or
Right.
family stuff, and it's like we only have so much energy to give, and when it's getting taken from
Mm-hmm.
other places, it's like it's hard to other areas are going to get sacrificed. So yeah, I think it really does, though. I kind of, back to your question, is I don't know, I don't have anything in place like a protocol, but I really believe that there could be something to dive into around that, around just like continually monitoring
Yeah.
the mental state and like where people are at. And the biggest thing I
Mm-hmm.
think that kind of comes to mind is just like a weekly check-in of just like, hey,
Yeah.
have a few points, like rate 1 to 5, and then just like, and then over time you can kind of see the trends. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that the mental toughness is yeah, it can be a tricky one, and it's just dependent as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think a few things that kind of popped into my head is that the best endurance coaches, and I speak generally from the endurance side of things, just that's just because what I know. Um, the best endurance coaches are the type of individuals who are walking around to their athletes. Oh, hey, how's it going? How's your
Mm,
girlfriend? How's your boyfriend? Like those sort of things. Like kind of, and they're kind of like taking into account. It's like, oh well, he's a little hesitant today. Like he looks a little tired. Like he's not too enthusiastic when I brought up like his girlfriend, even though I know they've been dating for a long time. Like so I think it's like you may not even need anything that's like
mhm,
super formal, but like having just that
mhm,
rapport with your athlete and not being, like I think a lot of the times what you can struggle with in terms of like being a coach is that like super differential and
mhm,
power dynamic where they're
mhm,
unwilling to share with you like, oh hey, like I had a super
mhm,
shitty day
mhm,
today, like failed a test, like for my undergrad classes, or like my got in a huge fight with like my girlfriend or boyfriend, other things like that. And like you said, that's certainly going
mhm,
to affect your ability to perform on any given day. And the way that I think about stress is that everybody's got a bucket, and that bucket is
mhm,
full of however
mhm,
much stress you have. And however full that bucket is, when you enter the gym or you go,
mhm,
for your workout, you only have a certain amount that you can
mhm,
fill up that bucket even more before it
yeah,
starts overflowing. And then when your bucket starts to overflow, that's when you start to get issues
mhm,
like injury,
mhm,
like
mhm,
mental health
mhm,
stuff, like all of that. And that's like, man, I tell you what, during my PhD, I felt like my bucket was
mhm,
so full
mhm,
all the time that I couldn't even, start to take on, say,
mhm,
like volume or anything like
mhm,
that in my exercise, because it was like as soon as I just do a little bit, it'd be like, oh, tweak my shoulder again. Oh, did this,
mhm,
that, or the other. And, it was one of those things where at that point, it probably would have been best just to be like, okay, like we're just going to go for walks. We're going to take the dog for a walk. We're going to, do things that, relieve that stress bucket rather than
mhm,
continue to
mhm.
like build it up. And I didn't have a coach at the time, but I think it would have been very useful to be able to talk to a coach or some individual where I could
Yeah,
like share that sort of stuff and then get
yeah.
that perspective. And then they could tell me, hey, you should probably go a little
Mhm,
easier,
mhm.
right? Because at the end of the day, I think that's the role of a coach more, is to keep you in tune with what's
Mhm.
going on in your body and then also make those switches accordingly. Like I think last week you and I were talking about how, yeah, and you touched on it here too, is like, most of your athletes will come in and they're like, yeah, like what do I need to do, coach? Like is it two a
Mhm.
days all the
Mhm.
time, blah blah blah. And you're just like, no, like let's do some zone 2 stuff. And they're like, yeah, but that's like super easy. Like, no, but tell me like what I actually have to do. You're like, zone 2 stuff. Like you have to relax, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think it's, I think being a coach is kind of like gives
Mm.
you a different
Mm.
lens on, or g- allows you to see an athlete through a lens that they don't
Mm.
see themselves through, because a lot of us, like our type A individuals, we see ourselves as like these people who aren't ever working hard enough. We're never doing enough. Like we always have to do more. And that always gives I think for a lot of us, it'll
Mm.
eventually bite you in the
Yeah.
butt.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I think what comes to me for that is like how, in order to be a successful coach, whatever that is, you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself as well. As you were talking, I was
Hmm.
realizing, I was kind of going through and thinking about some of the individuals and athletes that I coach, and I've realized that I start to know, like, as soon as someone gets out of the car, I can tell if this is gonna be a good day or not. I can just see it on them, their body
Hmm.
language, just and being able to sense that stuff and is so important in being able to coach people. But in order to be able to sense that stuff,
Hmm.
I have to be able to sense that within my own self. And if I can't tell that within myself, there's
Right.
no way I'm going to be able to see that within other people. So there's a piece of
Hmm.
just like making sure of how important taking care of yourself is to be able to give that to other people. And then also, I think it gets it's
Right.
a tricky balance, because I wholeheartedly believe that, you know, coaching is so much more than just writing workouts or monitoring exercise, or just being there in the gym. There's a lot of other stuff that comes into play with it, and I've got myself in trouble in the past where I almost have gone too far down the other end, where I'm like, then I'm trying to like
Mm.
help too much in areas that are outside. I'm like, hey, I'm the coach here,
Yeah.
and it's tricky because like I need to be
Yeah.
involved in the other stuff, or not involved, but at least like up to knowing of like how things are going, so I can design things. And
Yeah.
then as I start to just want to naturally help and care, it can be easy to start getting pulled over there. And I've found myself getting like tricky situations where I'm like, okay, I need to back up. So again, it's just finding that balance of
Hmm.
like, how can you like fully be there for someone and try to yeah, just fully get as much as you can from them, with also respecting boundaries. um
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that in any, say like working relationship, power dynamic relationship, it's always finding whatever that good balance is between, you and say the individual athlete, the person you're mentoring, the person you're coaching. It doesn't matter what sort of situation it is, but it's like figuring out like, okay, well, maybe this person needs a little bit more involvement. Like I need to get to know them a little bit better. Whereas there's other people who, like people I've worked with in the past where they're just like, yep, you know, I don't personally need anything other than, just
mhm,
we're
mhm.
doing our job. Right. I'm always the type of person who's like, man, it'd be really nice if somebody just like
Yeah,
asked me how I was doing every once in
yeah.
a while, or like, like knew a little bit more about me, because, for me, it is important, like when, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's work, whether it's doing the podcast with you, whether it's, like really anything that I do, I want to feel like I'm part of,
Mhm,
like, say, a community and part of a group of people that, like, you know they don't have to, like, care for me as much
mhm,
as like my
mhm,
fiance, for example, but like care enough to just be like, oh, hey, Phil, like, how are you doing? Like, how are things going? Oh, I remember you were really excited about this. Like that sort of stuff goes so, like, such a long way for me personally. But again, that's not for everybody. Some people it's just like,
mhm,
hey man, how's it going? Yep, how you feeling? Good. Okay,
mhm,
here's the workout for today. I'm gonna be
mhm,
watching stuff.
mhm,
All
mhm.
right, good to go.
Yep. I
So,
question how much, because I agree,
oh,
and
go ahead.
I believe that there's those two types. And what I've started to realize is like the people I think that are more like more distance, is they're actually craving that. They just don't know it within themselves yet.
Mm,
It's like they're just not
yeah,
aware of it. But it's something that they still crave and want. They just haven't come to that point for themselves as well. Um,
yeah. I think, man, I think that that is an interesting point, because maybe they're, they're in the point where it's like they don't even
Mm,
recognize that they need it quite yet. So they're like, oh well, oh, it's just work,
yeah.
like I just got to go do it. When in all actuality, it's like, well, if you really took kind of like a step back and like looked at it, you're like, yeah, like the reason why I show up every day is because it does build a sense of community. And maybe if I wasn't so closed off, I'd build even more sense of community. But I mean, even I think for guys especially, it's hard to voice those sort of opinions, right? Because growing up, like, I mean, you were a wrestler, right? Like, how many times did you hear people just be like,
Yeah.
oh, quit being a little baby, like, like suck
Yeah.
it up, like get back in there,
Yeah.
like do all that sort of stuff. And it's like, and I think there is some level of it is appropriate to build some level of, say, like mental toughness by like encouraging somebody to be a little
Mhm,
bit
mhm.
stronger than they are. But I also think that from all of that kind of inundation of like, don't ever show your emotions, other things like that, we as guys kind of suffer in a sense because we're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then then that can be really hard, right? Because then you feel like you have to deal with all of your emotions all on
Yes.
your own all the time. You can't
Yes.
talk to anybody about it. And who knew this was going to be turn into a victimization of man podcast, sort of
It's
deal.
so true though, and
um
that's the thing is like there's a book out there called The Man Rules, and it talks about the stereotypes that are put on men, and it's like be tougher, like pull your
mhm,
bootstraps up, men don't cry, and as much as there is space for that, there needs to be, but there also needs to be space for the other end. And I see it as I work with kids as
mhm,
well, and I see it within kids, and I see it
yeah,
manifest in traumatic ways. I really do. I see it manifest in traumatic ways, and that's one
yeah,
thing. I've had a talk with someone recently about like the body doesn't do anything by accident. Like when you have to go to the restroom, like you need to go to the bathroom. Like go. When you sneeze, you're sneezing
right,
for a reason. The body's very smart. Unless there's some disease, like your body knows what it's doing. And a lot of time there's these
right.
bodily needs that men don't cry, show up strong, that are like your body's trying to do something, but we're shoving it down and saying, no, don't do that. We're fighting it.
We're like
And
fighting
then
it.
that just
Yeah.
stays and festers, and then it builds, and then it gets expressed in
Hmm.
non-healthy ways. And I see it with some of the kids that I work with, is
Hmm.
like they have to have this persona of like, I'm like, no, it's okay if you weren't good at this today. That's okay. There's nothing wrong. It's
Right.
okay to be
It's okay
frustrated.
to be
Exactly.
frustrated. Yeah.
So it really
Yeah.
is, I think, just like for development, especially looking at kids, is like teaching them that it's okay to, like, one, just listen to your body, and then two, also it's okay to struggle. Like you don't have to be perfect.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. Like, growing up, I just have so many personal anecdotes, but like growing up, I was always the type of person who was like, okay, everything's got to be perfect. I gotta do everything and never get in trouble, nothing like that. So then when I actually did start to like say,
Mm,
get in trouble, or like couldn't get straight A's when I went to undergrad,
mm,
it
mhm,
really rocked me. And like I think that's where CrossFit's a really special sport, because first of all, it builds community. It brings people in from all different sorts of backgrounds and stuff like that. But then also there's so many different disciplines you have to be good at that you're not going to be perfect at. And it requires practice. So when you're in the gym and something isn't going well, like you can't get a handstand, or you can't do, handstand push-ups or something like that. It's like, okay, well, I got 5 today. I scaled a lot, but that means that I have room for growth. And those are such valuable lessons, going like tying this all back into how sport and life can be intertwined, right? Teaching kids that, oh, you're probably not going to be
mm,
able to do handstand push-ups right away.
mm,
So what do? We scale it down, and then we go from there and we build up, and you can measure your progress.
mm,
And it's like that's super rewarding, and that's something that I think you know will help kids in the long run be like, okay, well, yeah, I tried this thing out
Mm,
today and I was absolute garbage at it.
mm,
But
mm,
what did Coach Andy tell me? He told me that I can reduce how hard it is, I can progress it,
mhm.
and it's okay to be frustrated
Yeah,
because I am ticked that, I didn't do it well. But in
yeah.
order to overcome it, I have to practice it. So, man, yeah, I think that's that actually is something like I've always loved the CrossFit community, but
Mhm,
that's something I never thought about was like, if you have like
mhm,
kids within CrossFit,
mm,
so many valuable life lessons could be learned from that because, I chose running
mhm,
because
mhm,
I was good
mhm,
at running. And, obviously there's like
mm,
struggles within, day-to-day stuff, but it's because
mhm,
I chose it because I was good at it. And, then that was kind of me coping and being like, well,
mm,
this is me like not overcoming, say like
mhm,
my
mhm,
deficits in like
mhm.
football or like skill sports and stuff. So yeah, I just think
Yeah.
that was a really cool add-on for people to think about.
Yeah. And that's what, as you were talking, it kind of brought into my mind of this like, that is the one thing that is so special about CrossFit is like all of these things that you have to be so good at. It's like, and that's what makes like a good CrossFitter. So is because they're so contradicting. It's like you have to be good at endurance and enduring, but you also have to be strong.
Hmm.
And like from a physiological standpoint, like they're just on two opposite ends of the spectrum. And what it
Exactly.
takes to be good at this is like not the same as that. So when people, and then it just manifests there. The same thing with like gymnastics and then the weightlifting and then there's just so many components to CrossFit. And that's the one thing I think that makes it so special is like finding somebody who can have all of these qualities and they're never going to be the best of the best, but they can still express them at a very high level
Hmm.
through multiple different domains is what makes it really pretty cool and unique.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too it teaches people that you don't have to be, perfect within any one of those cuz like, I don't think Matt Frazier was a perfect runner. He wasn't a perfect, uh uh, uh gymnast. Like, but he was pretty darn good at all of them because he practiced them a lot and was like really dedicated to actually developing those skills.
Yeah.
And granted, he probably was almost a perfect weightlifter. Not quite, but
Yeah.
he was pretty darn close. Um,
Uh-huh.
but that's again, it's just it's and that's the difference again between like sport and wellness, like the sport and wellness side of CrossFit too. Is like if you're just going to CrossFit for wellness, then just trying to get better, that's all you can ask for on any given day. Whereas, when you're getting into like the professional realm, the performance realm of things, then it's like, okay, well, maybe I do need to get a little closer, to that, what people would say is perfect in a
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
but yeah, those are a little different.
yeah. Well, and that's my whole, I think, and again, I don't mean this, that I will forever love CrossFit and CrossFit will always be a piece of my coaching and the way I look at things. And
Hmm.
CrossFit has changed the trajectory of my life. So I don't ever want to take that away. But that's one of the downfalls I've found with CrossFit is there is, when we're looking at just a more holistic health of a human being, there's a lot of limitations from a anatomical standpoint and a physiological standpoint is like
Hmm.
it's not the most conducive uh, for just general health and well-being. And I shouldn't say the most.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's every program has good and bad. There's
Right.
value and things that people struggle in every program, and CrossFit is really good if we're looking at just like the general population. It getting people excited about training, building a community, building accountability. Like they get people in the gym that would know that if it wasn't for CrossFit would never be in a gym. So it's
Yeah.
like that is a win. That is like
Yeah.
their next level when it comes to that. But where CrossFit struggles, and this is why I just love CrossFit as a sport, because I think it's a great sport, and just with any sport, you know there's this health versus performance spectrum, and like
Hmm.
they're not the same. They're encompassing, but they're not necessarily the same. And uh, there's this piece where when people do CrossFit for just general health and well-being, they aren't, again, from an anatomical standpoint, they're putting their bodies in positions that are just not successful for them and are really increasing the risk for injury and then keeping them from coming back into the gym. And then also just from a health perspective of like, what should my heart be doing? What should my muscles be doing? What should be happening with my hormones? Like CrossFit, they do a couple things really, really good, but they're missing a lot of other stuff that is very, very impactful. And again, that's, I think the good thing about CrossFit is there's so much autonomy. Like when you're an affiliate owner, you can then program. It's not like there's, hey, like I believe F45, it's like you're an F45 franchise and then we put out the programming and then everyone's doing the F45 programming. Whereas like CrossFit, there's more autonomy to where it's like, hey, I'm going to open a gym. I decide what everyone does. So you really do get it like the level of the coaches or the owners, like you can make it as good or as bad as you want based on who's riding it. But just the format and the structure and the way it's outlined, it just, it can get lost. But that's where, I can go down a whole rabbit hole here, but it's like, it's tricky because like you look at gymnastics and a lot of times I see CrossFit classes when we're looking at like general population, they're bringing people in who haven't been exercising and then they see like handstand walking or kipping pull-ups and they're like, well, I want to do that. And it's like, that's not what's best for you right now. But then it comes down to then a teaching of like, they can still, like the principles are there. Like it's gymnastics. It's not, you have to do muscle ups, you have to handstand walk. It's like, those are part of the principles. Those are gymnastics. So for you, it's like, your gymnastics is maybe some bear walks. Your gymnastics is maybe like just some shoulder taps, like moving your body through space, and it's changing like, hey, this is still gymnastics. That's why the principles are great. They just get lost in transition a lot.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like the people that get drawn to CrossFit are again those type A individuals, and they're like, well, I want to do the hardest thing right now.
Yes.
And that's where a good coach comes in, right? Because a good coach will be in the gym and be like, whoa, Phil, you're not ready to do kipping handstand push-ups right now. Like I can see that, like you can barely lift one shoulder above your head and the other one goes perfectly. So that's going to have, imbalances and stuff. So let's focus on getting good range of motion, doing those shoulder taps, like, working like with your arms locked out. Right. And, I think like early on in like the CrossFit thing is like, there was a statement that was like, yeah, well, the cream is going to rise to the top. Like the best owners and affiliates and coaches are going to have the most successful businesses and they're going to be the ones that are going to be really personalizing and kind of catering towards the individual. Whereas, like, even though everybody can technically like launch an affiliate, doesn't mean it's going to be, like appropriate for everybody. Right. So yeah, I like that approach. And I think too, that, coming back to this idea that I think for the most part, most people, who are consistently exercising would do better from slowing down or going a little bit easier. Man, you could get a heck of a good workout just doing like all of like the super scaled options for pretty much everything in most CrossFit stuff. And it might be a little safer. Like, you're not doing anything like crazy swinging. Like the worst injuries I've ever had in terms of CrossFit are when I'm like, swinging through for a muscle up or, doing like those like kipping things because my body and my anatomy just isn't built for that. So, I do think, I think it could be a little bit more scaled for even longer for people, but you can only hold back people as long as their mental capacity will be able to hold it. And that that's funny because that kind of brings us all the way back to square one. I think this is a great conversation. I want to stop it here because I think, we have some other topics that we're really interested in talking about, like assessments and, how to actually assess an athlete and, do their programming from there. But I think this was a really cool discussion of, kind of the mental aspects of sport and performance, how things translate, for from sport to the real world, and everything in between. So we'll stop there for today. Andy, do you have Instagram that you want to plug, for people to find you?
Yeah, just my name, Andy Saint Germain. It's last name is St period Germain, and then where I coach at is Central Athlete, and again their Instagram is same, just Central Athlete, and then
Hmm.
Central Health ATX, which is where we have a lot of our more recovery protocols of sauna, ice bath, PIMP machine, red light therapy, vibration plates. So those are my three areas you can reach me or find me.
Yeah. Go follow Andy on Instagram. Ask him some questions about CrossFit and stuff, and send. You know where to find me. I'm at Critical02 on Instagram. If you're watching this video on YouTube, feel free to comment down below with any questions you have for us, any topics you want us to cover. We're going to be diving into all things science and CrossFit, and how we can actually start to take some of those physiological principles from the research implement them into CrossFit, because Andy and I both agree that there's a huge gap in the amount of science that's actually used within the CrossFit space. So we're really excited. I think that was a great first episode, Andy. I'm really excited to have you on, and it's an awesome, fresh perspective, in terms of CrossFit and like the research and scientific world. So thanks for coming on. We'll have him back, as soon as our schedules align again, which should be pretty regularly. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.